All right, welcome to NFL Outdated Cover 2 series. I am joined by former Iowa football player Tyler Kluver and host of WashedUp Walkons podcast. How's it going?
It's going great. I just got a workout in, uh, beat myself up in the garage, and now I'm here.
Nice, nice. Now, how often do you work out then?
Right now I'm working out about 6 days a week, so I take Sundays off, but every other day I'm into I'm into CrossFit, and I like to consider myself still young and competitive. So I kind of have training goals that align with CrossFit and some competitions with that. But yeah, that's what I do right now.
Well, I totally get that. I've been thinking about getting in CrossFit, but I've really just kind of been into a lot of cardio, some weights, but that's neither here nor there. Eventually, I'll get to CrossFit probably.
Whatever works. I do a lot of things, washed up walk-ons, and I don't know, 4 or 5 other different things that I would call the collective career of mine. But one of them is fitness coach, nutrition coach. And the biggest thing for my clients is finding them stuff that is sustainable. So whether it's CrossFit or whether it's cardio or whether it's boxing or whether it's body weight stuff in the living room, the number one contributor to success in health and fitness is something that is sustainable. So whatever you like and whatever suits you, I would suggest going with that.
I would totally agree. And people might call me crazy. I actually run an hour on the elliptical, and I just keep going, and I keep, increasing my time. I like to see the numbers in front of me. That definitely helps me,
For sure.
mentally. So.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, everyone has something that gets them going. So
Well, let's talk about something that definitely gets me going. It's Hawkeye football, and I'm definitely excited to have you joining me here and talk about some of your highlights at Iowa and the catch versus Ohio State, all of that stuff that kind of made your career.
well, that play itself, the polecat, was that was something that without I might have gone unnoticed, which at the long snapper position is probably a good thing, right? The old
Mhm.
trick and joke of special teams is if no one's talking about you, it's probably a good thing, right? So as a long snapper, I was very fortunate to spend 4 years as the starter for the Hawks. And that was a combination of a little bit of prep and hard work in high school and the ability to come in at a playable weight. I was not exactly an athletic body or athletic frame when I walked in, but I was heavy enough to where I managed for a couple years until I built that athletic body. And I was 215 or so when I came into the building, and was fortunate to come in behind a senior that still is playing in the NFL today. And Casey Kreider plays for the New York Giants. He's spent a little bit of time with the Cowboys and then was a Pro Bowler with the Denver Broncos. And he left after 2013 after just 4 months with him. And I was able to learn as much as I could from him. And then it was kind of me by myself and just figuring it out. And when you play for 4 years, you go through some pretty cool stuff. And some of the highlights for me were that Ohio State catch in my senior year, that game in general, just the ability to knock off a top 5 team, and some pretty cool blackout unis. And the year before that, freshman Keith Duncan, I snapped that ball when we upset Michigan
Oh yeah.
on the buzzer beater field goal. So that was pretty cool as well. 2015, I always come back to it, and it's not that exciting. But it was for me at the time. While I was there, we only were able to win the bowl one time, and it was in that undefeated year, and it was a 10-6 game. It really wasn't a good football game, and it was the opener of our Big Ten play up there in Camp Randall. And the moment that Nate Meyer drove through the guard and had him step on Joel Stavi's foot, and they fumbled the ball, and Faith Akakity jumped on top of it, kind of sealed the deal for us in that game. And that's probably one of the most memorable moments of my time at Iowa. So it's some of those little things that sort of mean something in the grander scheme that stick with me. Obviously, getting to be in a Division I program where there's just elite people, really really high performing individuals, is something that I miss on a daily basis. So that is that's a snapshot of some of the highlights from my career.
Absolutely. Well, and talk about that a little bit, some of the coaches that kind of helped you. Cause, obviously you got, KF is you guys call him on your pod. But there are also other coaches there. Are there some other coaches that kind of helped you at Iowa that really just kind of made the experience that much better?
You know, my coach specifically, actually now, LeVar Woods is the full-time special teams coach. When I was there, they were still transitioning into that role. They added a 10th coach spot to Division I programs, maybe all coaching programs, I'm not sure, my senior year. And they were still kind of figuring that out at Iowa, at least. And so for the majority of my career, the specialists were kind of on our own. And it's kind of how they always did it. And so film was short, critique was self-based, and it was just sort of make sure that you're ready to go. Otherwise, we're going to find someone else who can do that independently and sort of self navigate their career because you don't have a position coach. Coach White, Chris White, who's been in the NFL. He's been in college, bounced around a lot of places, and wasn't exactly the most liked coach. Ended up getting fired or let go in 2015 or 16 after that good year. He wasn't the most personable coach, but there were aspects about him that really, he was probably better suited for the NFL. And I think in that sort of gear, it made college kids, if you wanted to succeed, have to grow up pretty quickly. And I think that was really good for me because I needed that when I was 18 and 19 years old. And then Coach Wallace was, for the first 2 or 3 years, he was the all-encompassing special teams coach. Seth Wallace is probably he's one of the best dudes I know and just a really good friend, sort of acquaintance now that I'm out of the program. And then LeVar Woods as well, when he transitioned to having control of special teams my senior year, maybe just senior year. Those two guys I worked most closely with, and both really good dudes. And the kind of guys that still text me once in a while to this day. They listen to the podcast, they reach out, hey, I listened to this episode, this kind of thing. And when I go back for a kid's day or they see me in the stands, they always make sure to say hi, and just a lifelong kind of relationship thing. So those guys were really great in making it feel like a family. And when you feel like a family, you play better and you play closer, and teams that play close are usually good.
Well, I always wondered about that. Yeah. So I got a chance to go to the Northwestern game, and obviously on your Northwestern pod, you talked about this. Kevin maybe talked about the smell of the locker room and those different aspects, and how much that plays into performance, and it kind of does at times.
Yeah, performance. It's hard to say. It's not very quantifiable. I think that, and I say this almost every week on the pod, is everything in an 11-person team sport is so multi-factored and multivariable that it's hard to ever pinpoint one thing or the other. But when you play, it is something intangible, and it makes sense, but then it's hard to pinpoint when you really break it down. It's much easier to get up for a game like the Penn State game this year than it is to play Illinois, right? When it's cold, right? It's the same game. You're going to play football for 60 minutes. The rules are the same. It's still 11 on 11, but there's just something different about those two environments. And yeah, all that stuff plays into it when the locker rooms, like a high school locker room, and there's not enough space and everybody's a little cramped, and you're just that much more on edge because you don't have the room that you want and you're trying to walk over people's equipment. Like everyone's just a little bit more uncomfortable. And if it's just 0.1% across the entire team, then that adds up to a couple percent, and the margins are already very, very small, right? So if you could somehow measure that percentage of like, oh, this team's got a 51% chance to win, 49% for the other team, and then that couple percent because of the environment shifts it the other way, it could be the difference in a game. But it's hard to really, quantify that and hold on to it. It all matters. Northwestern, definitely one of the worst. Them, Purdue, and Maryland, they don't really provide great accoutrements to the to the experience, at least in the form of a locker room.
Well, yeah, like as a fan, it's easy just kind of, look things like just in a vacuum and just kind of then you forget that, players are humans and different things affect and, the team. And obviously that's why, Hayden Fry did his, pink locker room
Yeah,
thing, and it makes a difference.
absolutely. Hayden wasn't stupid.
Mm.
That's part of it, right? And though the opposing locker room space wise, functionality wise, is very accompanying for an opposing team, there is just this extra element of everything in here is pink. Like everything is pink. It's this weird dull pink color. And even if it doesn't actually make you uncomfortable, it's one more thing that everybody that walks into the locker room thinks, oh, they spend 1 second of mental energy on it. And again, across an entire team, maybe that does enough to just barely throw you off your game, or maybe take your focus away from the playbook, or whatever it may be. So yeah, that pink locker room, I often forget about it because you never see it as a guy on the Iowa team, but it's a nice little standing factor to sort of represent that whole conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so what were some of the best places that you played then?
Um, as far as just overall environment goes,
Yeah, yeah.
the Shoe and Happy Valley are both really impressive stadiums. I got to go to I've played in every stadium except for the Big House and the Shoe. I traveled to the Shoe. I was not I did not play there. So and from what I hear, the Big House it's cool from the outside as an aesthetic, but really because of the way it's built, it's not that loud, and it's actually not that special as far as anything else that goes around along with it. Um Happy Valley, Beaver Stadium it's at night, it probably rivals Kinnick as one of those places where it would be you would pay money, you'd pay all the money in the world to be someone who gets to experience that. And when we went up there in 2016, we got smoked, but it was still an incredible environment and a great place to play. Um, Minnesota honestly has really good facilities. The stadium isn't anything special. Nebraska has a really nice stadium, really cool, kind of well put together, clean looking stadium, nice facilities. Um, and I always say Iowa State because just the rivalry factor of that game and the you can almost taste it in the air when you're at Jack Trice Stadium. Uh, it's that's I was always a person who liked away games. In high school, I liked away
Really?
games. I was a linebacker, and I love to go into other people's place and make them look bad in front of their home stadium. I don't know. It's sort
Yeah.
of a quirky thing, and um, we were able to do that 3 times at Iowa State. So those were always some of my favorite.
Absolutely. Well, talking about favorites, uh, who are some of your favorite teammates other than the ones that you do the podcast with?
Oh, those 2, they're definitely they're low on the list. They're not my favorites. No. You know, so many teammates, and at Iowa, the way that they recruit people and kind of bring people into that program, it's I'm not going to say it's a people first program, but it is really. They find people that have football talent and that have potential, but that really are the kind of person they want to represent the program. And then they'll figure out the football stuff later. And that's sort of part of the developmental nature of Iowa football. And, to this day, every single day, Drake and Kevin from the podcast, but then also Bo Bauer, Josie Jewell, and Ike Butker, 2 of which, Josie and Ike, who are still playing in the league.
Mhm.
Bo, who bounced around to a couple teams, different camps. Us 6 talk every day.
That's
And
awesome.
and those are a few of my favorite teammates. Of course, you look at some of the all-timers like CJ and George, who were in the class above me. George obviously doing his thing, just scored last night on Monday Night Football.
Mhm.
CJ, just kind of one of the grittiest all-time Hawkeyes, best guy in the locker room. Everybody loves him kind of guy. A leader, a true leader. It's unfortunate that I was younger at the time, but nothing you could really do about it. But guys like James Morris and Kirksey and Hitchens,
Mhm.
my first year, were really, really great leaders and sort of all-time Hawkeyes as well. Brandon Sheriff and Brett Van Sloten go along with those guys. So uh, just I really look back over a 5-year career and realize how many absolutely stud humans I was around. Again, those elite sort of performers. And you don't, you go to the grocery store on a Tuesday when you're 27, like I did today, you don't find elite performers walking around in there. It's just everyday people, and that's fine.
Mhm.
But when you've been around that kind of group for 5 years, um, it leaves a significant hole sort of in your life. And so those are some of the guys that I think back on and cherish my time with.
Absolutely. And, talk about like elite performers, but even those big moments like that kick against Michigan, you know, is there, in that kind of huddle, I mean, is there someone that's kind of, talking up or talk about big moments like that? I mean, is it just kind of like understood the gravity of the situation or?
Yeah, it definitely is. I get goosebumps even just thinking back to it.
Yeah.
To be honest, I was probably the most vocal on the Michigan, uh, and that's not because I was some big time leader or anything, but as a snapper, I kind of control that play, make sure everybody's lined up. I think George, maybe, and a couple other linemen on that were maybe older than me, but other than that, I'm the most veteran guy on that PAT field goal unit. Keith obviously is a true freshman, right? So, and we have Ron Caluzzi holding that ball, who is a transfer and, you know, 1 year in the program. So sort of, I remember specifically that a lot of the guys on that unit had been there the year before when we kicked the Marshall Kane 57-yard winner against Pitt.
Mhm.
And so it felt very similar, though we were down, right? And so the gravity was a little bit higher. Um, we miss that kick and we lose. We miss the Marshall kick and we just go to overtime. So, yeah, I mean, everybody in that moment, again, elite performers, right? And they all know their job. So there's not a lot to say, like, hey, here's what you need to do. I think I offered up, some settling words. At least I think what may have been settling, like, hey, boys, we've been here before. Everybody just get down. This one's going to go through and we're going to win this game. And it's one of those things where you just sort of it's just another rep, and if you can make it just another rep like you do in practice, um, more than likely you're gonna hit it, and we did, and that was obviously one of the big time moments of that I got to be a part of.
Absolutely. Well, talk about some other big time moments that you were a part of. Like you were a part of the Under Armour All American game, and talk about that experience. Like who are some of the players that you remember playing with, and just that whole experience.
Yeah, as a wild experience, sort of crazy the story of just being a part of that. I, you know, as a high school football player, you have to be the best of the best, the 5-star to get recruited to that game and offer, kind of offered to come play in that. As a specialist, they kind of contracted that out to just so happen to be my kicking coach, right?
Oh,
Or
wow.
so Jamie Cole is a kicking guru. He runs high school specialist camps across the country, probably the most well known, which is why this game picked him to just kind of pick the guys for it. And he has a bunch of connections. And so every year their big camp in July, summer of of going into that high school football season, the two seniors who score the highest at that camp end up getting to go to they get chosen for that game. In fact, when I was going, I think they still do it this way. There's a charting system, and the top guy who charts out the highest gets an automatic bid. He's the automatic selection, and then next 5 on the chart get to like snap off for the second spot, right? And I actually wasn't even going to go to the camp. I had already gone to sort of the team camps, Nebraska, Minnesota, Northern Illinois, um, talked with Alabama and Auburn and Miami, and all that stuff was crazy. And I'd camped for Iowa and sort of made a connection there. So I was kind of already like at the point where schools were going to have me for game day visits, Iowa State, everybody. And I was just going to go there and then eventually hope that someone offered me the preferred walk-on spot or a scholarship. And my parents were like, why don't you just go to this last camp? I was ranked number 2 at the time in the country. So I was very fortunate to kind of have a knack for long snapping just in general. But there was nothing more to prove really. I was the second best in the nation, and I really was the first best. I'll say that forever just because I'm irked by it. I go to the long story short, I go to that camp and I end up winning. I chart out and I win the camp. And which is still kind of nuts to me because we're talking like hundreds of long snappers, hundreds of kickers that come to this thing. And somehow I end up at the top of the chart, just had an incredible day, and I get the automatic bid. And so it was like, it all happened very fast. It was like, all right, here's our, I finished the charting session. I knew where I was at, and I knew that I had hit all my snaps. I couldn't have, I got every point I could on the second day. So I knew that I was still in first. And all of a sudden, it's just like, Tyler Kluver, you're the automatic bid for the Under Armour All-American game in Florida in January. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is a little bit life-changing here. And then next thing you know, I'm down in Florida over winter break of my senior year, right? Senior year, yeah. And there, there's definitely some guys that played in that game that are still, pretty notable today. The most probably is Alvin Kamara.
Oh, yeah.
I remember walking around talking to Alvin for 7 days straight. His locker was right next to mine down in the facility we were using, the Wild World of Sports, the Disney resort down there. Yeah, me and Alvin Kamara just walking around.
Wow.
The number 1 recruit in our class was Robert Nkemdiche. He went to Ole Miss.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he's really panned out in the NFL, but I think he was on a team for a while.
Mm-hmm.
OJ Howard was down there. Christian Hackenberg, Alex Anzalone, who played on the Saints for a while and now is somewhere else. Who else? Laquan Treadwell, who was a first round pick to the Vikings as a receiver. Vernon Hargraves, who was a top DB in the country, potentially won the Thorpe Award our senior year. So just a bunch of dudes who are just crazy. And then me, right? So there was definitely some crazy talent, and it was a wild experience. Very, very crazy.
Well, talk about, you said kind of like scoring out, in like, how do they kind of evaluate long snappers? I mean, like when you talk about snap off, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. It's super nerdy and not something that a lot of people, unless you snap, understand, but it's like, it's based on speed, accuracy, and sort of an intangible, speed, accuracy based on, you basically snap at like literally this PVC target that's like a square, and it has this vinyl flap over it. And if you shoot it through the hole, it counts as a point. If you don't, it doesn't. And then speed, from the moment you kind of twitch and start your snap to when that ball hits the post or gets to that depth of the target. So those two are kind of the big ones. And then there's sort of this third intangible quality of like, do you snap a clean looking football? Like, does it, like everyone knows when there's a beautiful pass, it just spirals perfectly and it comes down and it's just like perfect. There's that kind of intangible quality to long snapping as well that people in the industry sort of are able to judge. And so there's those 3 things. It was something like 3 sets of 15. So 45 snaps over the course of 2 days that were charted.
Wow.
And you could get like a total of 60 points. So each one was a point. And then there was, if you were in each set of 15, if you averaged below a certain amount, you got bonus points. So kind of rewarded for snapping quickly. and then short snaps, like the PAT field goal snaps were charted in there as well. And I ended up getting like, I think they've changed the scoring system back then, but I ended up scoring like the highest that has ever been scored. It was like 72 out of 65 points. I got like 7
Wow.
extra points because I had all of the bonus speed points, and there was like a money ball, like in a 3-point contest, like the last ball was like worth 2 or whatever. I don't know. It was, again, I had the craziest day of my life snapping wise, and it was on the right day.
Well, and this is interesting to me. So my son just started like sixth grade football this year, and
Mhm.
they had him at center and kind of snapping, and I would kind of notice how he was doing it, and he's like, oh, I don't really like that. I'm like, you were good at it, and then he started teaching some of his friends, but then he started kind of not liking it and moving to safety and
Right.
doing all right at safety. But I said, if you could really get good at snapping, I mean that's huge. That's a really important.
Yeah, you can carve out a career.
Absolutely.
I tried my best to make it into the NFL. I was a little short. 5'10" isn't very appealing to the NFL scouts.
So
I
you tried out for some teams then?
absolutely, yeah. I went through the entire 2017. We finished with the Pinstripe Bowl on, might have been on Christmas Day, or I think it was on the 28th. So a few days after Christmas. And the entire plan was, I was pretty sure that I wasn't going to make it in the NFL just based off of odds, and I'm fairly honest with myself, and I know that realistically there's 20 or 25 guys that come out each year as a senior long snapper that would love a shot at the NFL. There's only 32 jobs, and I'd say maybe 4 of them open up each year, and that's on a good year. So even with just the senior class, you're looking at, you might have a 15 or 20% chance of making one of those spots. But then you have to consider the last 2 or 3 classes that have all come out. Long snapper isn't really necessarily the hardest job to maintain. If you just want to go get like go get a job as an accountant, you could still snap for 30 minutes to an hour each day on the side and still be in shape to play NFL long snapper. So there's a pool of guys who are always sort of a free agent and ready. Um, and then in my case, most of those guys are 6'1", 6'2", all the way up to 6'4", 6'5". Some of them are tight ends that weren't quite good enough at tight end, but they're an athlete, so they learn how to long snap. Um, I've never had anybody be more honest with me, which I enjoy, but it was just unfortunate at the time. So we come back from that Christmas break. My career is over. It's the spring of 2018. I don't have any classes. I'm graduated, the whole thing. I'm just in town in Iowa City to train for the NFL. So I wake up every day at 8 o'clock. We roll over to the complex at 9 o'clock, train from 9 to 11, do my snapping workouts. I mean, it was the life. I was living the life for 3 or 4 months in that spring of 2018. And it was all for April, maybe March 31st, or I can't remember the day, but pro day, when
Mhm.
all the scouts come in. And at Iowa, we get every team. Every team is there, sometimes multiple scouts from each team. So we're looking at like 45 or 50 NFL personnel in the building. And they all came in and watched me run a 40 and watched me run a 3-cone drill and a 5-10-5 and bench press and vert, broad jump. And then they all stood there, and awkward as hell, I was just by myself snapping to Coach Woods, and I would snap it, and they'd all kind of look at me and time it and look at their timer and write something down on their paper. And I had a great day. I had a great pro day. And uh the Green Bay Packers scout probably spoke for all of them when he came up, and he was just like, you're really showing off as far as what a long snapper can do. We just wish you were taller. And I was
Wow.
like, yeah, no, I wish I was taller too. I can't do much about it. Um, and yeah, then nothing really ever matriculated. I was called by a couple teams right before the draft just to verify that my phone number was correct and that this was the number to reach me if for some reason they were going to reach out. And then nothing ever happened after that. So it was a very quick turnaround. I was fully prepared for it, and within about, shoot, it was probably a week or two after the draft, I was like, all right, cool. Football's over. Next time, next thing. Moving on.
So, I mean, is that kind of been, hard kind of mentally, just kind of, I mean, right away, you just kind of like is the next thing, but just kind of moving on to the next thing, or, the training, everything's kind of helped with that a little bit as well, or?
It's a good question because it really, talk about the people in the environment that I was in, leaving a hole. Um, Even more so, just the idea of not having football in your life anymore in the same facet that it was for the last, you know, 20, almost 20 years,
Mhm.
right? So since first grade till 2018, so 2001 to 2018, I was playing football every fall. And now all of a sudden that was over. Like there is no more football. And I could have gone some other sort of non-traditional routes like the arena league or Canada or something, but I wasn't interested in any of that.
Right.
And so yeah, I mean, it's um it's tough. I think it's why you see a lot of people struggle when they leave their playing career behind, and it's not necessarily just football, it could be basketball or baseball. You see a lot of athletes with kind of post-career depression and even more so identity crisis because they for their whole life have been an athlete. They've been um, a football player, right? For 5 years, I was the Iowa long snapper, and you really hang on to that. Like you walk around town and people know who you are, and they say hi, and you're cool. And then all of a sudden, you're not cool anymore. You're old news. And so I think it's why it's really important. And I was very fortunate because it was just kind of the person I am. But it's super important while you're a part of it and while you still do have it in your hands to find who you are outside of the sport and find who you are as a person and what you like to do and what gives you happiness and kind of just figure out who you are in the absence of what you currently are, right?
Absolutely.
Um, and so I didn't struggle too much with it at all. And then of course, I very much so, as far as in college, being a specialist, I played 8, if I'm lucky, maybe 12 plays a game. Maybe if there's a lot of punts, I'm upwards like maybe 15 is the most I ever played. My game days were always the off season. I lived for the off season workouts and training, and again, getting to perform with guys like Josie Jewell and win races and lift right next to guys like Tristan Wirfs and be just as strong as some of them in some things, never quite as strong as guys like that in total. But those off-season workouts were kind of my game day. And so, and it's my passion. And I kind of turned it into part of what I do now as a career. So I do still sort of feel that connection and that sense of worth from being physically fit and active and an athlete and competitive. Uh, And then, I'm still connected with the WashedUp Walkons as well, which was never the plan, but it was something that kind of created itself out of the hole that was not any longer having Iowa football, right? So, um, yeah, I still feel like I'm in college. I still feel like I'm just as athletic, and in some ways I probably am stronger, and I'm much more fit overall than I was when I played because I'm 30 pounds lighter, but just as strong, just as explosive. So, um, a lot of guys do struggle with that though. We've done several episodes on the podcast about that as well.
Well, yeah, and I love the podcast. I think now there's really a need, just an interest too about hearing kind of the behind the scenes stuff. As a fan, it's interesting to hear kind of some of the real stories and just hear. I like hearing about the details, like what it takes to snap a ball, or all those things that kind of it takes it's a lot. As a fan, it's easy to especially as an armchair quarterback, just to sit back and take for granted.
It's a The podcast has become sort of this weird platform where we have it very much so did start as a behind the scenes, right? Because in the beginning, um, we had 5 years of we had 5 years of personal experience. we were no longer connected to the program. So that, to some extent, there's some secrets and some stories that are very, very few and far between that we'll never tell or will never sort of shed light on because it's just part of that brotherhood. But 99.5% of sort of what happened and what our day to day was like, and how we lifted weights and our schedule and how we went about this in the off season and go down the list. We've talked about all of it on the podcast, and it was I would love to sit here and say that it was this great idea that I had while we were playing that, like, you know, my sophomore year, I realized there was a need in the market for Iowa Hawkeye content, and no one was doing it from the former player perspective. And I crafted this 5-year plan of putting together a podcast and this brand that we've created, but none of that is true. And looking back, it's crazy to me that it never actually dawned on me to do it, because I was into Pat McAfee in college. Like when he finally retired and started up his thing, which is sort of, he's probably like A plus tier top end guy of what we're doing, right? Like he is the top of the food chain when it comes to former players doing a podcast or a show or having their own brand. He's the guy. And I loved his show and I would listen to it every week, but it never dawned on me that, oh, I could do a Hawkeye version of this. But then 2018 came around again, after that spring that I had talked about. That season eventually did come around where it was the first year of us being out. I remember very clearly the first game against, oh gosh, I think it was Illinois State in 2018. I can't remember who it was, but I remember that first swarm that I was not a part of in 66 games. And I was on the other side of the wall, and and then watching it on TV the next week, and it was just like, wow, this is the new normal. This is going to take a little bit to settle in. And 3 weeks into that process, the Hawks are 3-0 or whatever they were in 2018. And we're again back in that message with the 6 guys, and those 6 guys are the ones that I lived with in college. And we're telling some story, or we're reminiscing. And at one point I just sort of made the comment like, man, if we publish this as like a book, or like, did some kind of interview, or like, whatever. At first it wasn't even podcast. It was like, if we could somehow put this out to fans, they would just crush over this behind the scenes content. And then it very quickly became, well, there's podcasting could work. And I wonder what it takes to put together a podcast. Like what, and then you Google it and you very, very quickly realize, at least, in 2018, back in 2010, it was probably a little bit more difficult, but, and now even 3 years later, it's become just, I mean, you can go out and you could literally know nothing, look it up on the internet, go out in 90 minutes, come back and record your first episode and have it published. And that's how easy it is to create a podcast. And the market proves that's true, because there's a ton of people out there who think that they can go and have this popular podcast now. And so it's that was a version of what we did, and we have learned all of the mistakes along the way, all the way to like now we have the fancy microphone, and I'm on realistically, all the equipment that I'm using right now combined is actually over $1,000, like on this, versus in the beginning it was like, hey, I'm gonna buy Kevin Drake, Josie, Ike, and Bo all at the time were still in NFL camps.
Right. And
so it was me, Kevin, and Drake who were like, yeah, we've got time. And even in the beginning, it was even more so like relevant because we knew everybody on the team, right? We've come out of that now where we almost know nobody on the team, but have still been able to sort of keep content that's relevant. And yeah, I was like, hey, I'm going to buy you guys a couple mics for $20 a piece. Plug it in, download, or we used, I think, Zencaster at the beginning. Now there's, Streamlabs and Restream, and we just use Zoom. Like we just record on Zoom and then export the file. But in the beginning, it was literally like a $50 operation, and with no plans to turn it into a brand or merchandise or Um, some of the stuff that's coming down the line for us, no idea to turn it into, we in August we signed with iHeartRadio,
Oh, cool.
and I mean just taking it to levels that were never even fathomed. It was never supposed to be, or was thought of as a potential future financial, a literal lucrative venture, but it has such turned into that, and the content I think has continued to get better. I think we've gotten better at podcasting, and it's literally become half of what I do now. And now we have an exclusive. We do a whole bunch of weekly exclusive content on Patreon, which is another way that we make money. And so like it's not only gone from like not profitable to profitable, but we now have like 3 or 4 different income streams within the WashedUp Walkons brand. So it's honestly nuts, and I don't know what I'm doing. I just kind of wake up every day and make sure that all the fires are put out, and things continue to keep happening. So it's been a blast.
Well, speaking of that, so you do the Hawks by a million, right?
Absolutely, that's
S-
us.
So where did that come from? I mean, other than wanting Iowa to win by a lot.
Yeah, I mean, we'd prefer that they win by a million every week. Haven't been able to get that done yet, but I think they're on their way at some point.
I don't
And
know about you. Sorry, I remember when I was at Iowa, and it was when Tim Dwight was there and everything, and it was it like 10% off for every touchdown scored at the
yeah,
apparel store, and I don't know if they still do that, but I was always excited when they were scoring a ton that year. So
yeah, and that would be a million would definitely not be a good thing for the stores offering that
no,
deal. But so we again, that first year, 2018, I think October 3rd, 2018 was the first ever podcast release from the WashedUp Walkons. And so, we're just actually over 3 years old. And it didn't take long before, Kevin and Drake and myself. I mean, I think everybody now, to be honest, the way that betting has become legal, and just sports gambling in general, it's become much more user friendly. You can download apps, and there's 60 or 70-year-olds who could download an app and understand how to sports gamble for $5 if they want some skin in the game. That's what me and my wife do. We never put anything more than like 5 or $10 down.
right,
But it's like fun to like, if Oregon and Washington State are playing late at night and you're watching the game and you don't really care about it, but then if you throw $5 down, now it's life or death situation, right? So eventually we got to the point where it was like, hey, at the end of the podcast, let's look at the lines for the Big Ten games and let's give our thoughts on it, just as some extra content and extra conversation topics, and we can finish with the Hawks game, and it'll be entertaining. And I think there was a string of games where like the Hawks covered that year 6 or 7 times in a row. And regardless of whether they were dogs or they were favored. And at game number 5 or 6, Drake, I think I asked Drake, like, hey, I'm actually curious, and I'm glad you bring this up because
hmm
I need to go back and find the first time that we said Hawks by a million on the podcast, because I would love
hmm
to like dub that out and put it in a newer episode.
yeah,
But I think at one point I was like, Drake, what do you think about this game? Or Kevin, what do you think? And Drake was like, at this point, they've covered 6 or 7 straight times. It's just Hawks by a million until they lose. And it was like, and we were like, oh, Hawks by a million, huh? And Barstool, I don't want to claim that we started this by a million thing, right? Because
right.
it's definitely a Barstool thing. We've had people contact us that went to Iowa in like the mid 2000s, and they're like, "Oh, we used to say Hawks by a million in like 2005 when I graduated." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's awesome. Like we definitely didn't create, like we weren't the first ones to ever say this,
Right.
but we were the ones to popularize it on social media and
Absolutely.
and start a brand off of it." Um, and so it just kind of became the thing. People just like all good things, it was organic, and it was, people ran with it. And so we just continued to say it each week. And then eventually we got through October, November, we did our first like Christmas merchandise drop, and Hawks by a million was one of our items. And it's been the staple of our brand ever since. So that's sort of how that started.
Oh, I love it. It's definitely something. I have mine as well. So, Um, I had a question as well. On the last, I don't think you've done the Minnesota one yet, right?
The Minnesota
Podcast. I was
hot
listening.
post game. Yeah, we just released that today, actually.
Okay, I'm gonna have to watch that one. I was watching the Northwestern one, and I don't know who brought up the bowl game gift options, and I this, you know. As a fan, it's interesting to hear. Like I knew there was like swag that you get, shirts or whatever. But there are different options that you can choose for the bowl games.
They all do it differently. So let's see if I can remember. My first year, we went to my first and my fourth year, we went to the Outback Bowl.
Hmm.
And at least when I was there, back when I was a kid, uh, the way they did it was you got specific, everybody got the same stuff. And it was, I think bowl games are hmm, five. I believe the gift total amount of money can be worth upwards of anything on $550 or less, something around there. So the bowl games are basically given the option to do that how they want. The Outback Bowl specifically would kind of outfit us with a package. Everybody got the same package, and it was worth right up to that 550 number. So I want to say it was a Fossil watch, a little bit of gear like a hat, a T-shirt, and maybe a jacket. Um, a Gosh, what else do we get? We some sort of electronic. I want to say like headphones, and then like a $100 gift card to Outback Steakhouse, and like a
Of course,
hundred,
yeah.
like 150 or $200 gift card to Best Buy. That's how they did it, right? That was 2013, 2016. 2014, we went to the Tax Slayer Bowl, otherwise known as the Hawk Slayer Bowl. We got demolished by Tennessee, but they still gave us the bowl gift, which was sweet of them. That was very kind,
Nice.
even though we didn't deserve it. That year, we got a suite. So it was like a point system. They came to Iowa City, and I imagine they also went to Tennessee for them. And there was like this 6-point system, right? So there was a group of gifts that were all 1 point. There was a group of gifts that were all 2 points, 3, 4, and they were all lined up like in our all American room with all these tables. And you as a player got 6 points. And so you could spend your 6 points how you wanted to. At the top level, it was like a full on reclining electric uh, reclining chair, or an
Wow.
I think Kevin, who you are talking about, mentioned the
Yeah.
Ninja blender. That was like a 4 or 5
Yeah.
point item. Um, there was headphones, there was Beats, there were all the way down to like I remember I needed like there was something that was 2 points and something that was 3 points that I wanted. Oh, a speaker system, entertainment system, a sound bar. I had gotten something that was like 2 or 3 points, and I needed to fill the item with like one more point, and so I got um like this remote control helicopter, just the stupid dumb shit.
Right.
Um that was how we did it then. The Rose Bowl, we got like it was similar to the Outback Bowl. There was like specific items. We got some swag and a watch and a ring and some other stuff. I think we got a ring at like 4 or 5 of the places, 4 out of 5 of the places. And then the Pinstripe Bowl in my final year was like almost entirely uh clothing based because it was new era. And so we got hats. We got a winter coat that's probably worth like $400 or $500, but it was probably counted as like $100 or $200 of the 550. Hats, long sleeves. I mean, we just got a bunch of clothes for that one, and we got a ring as well. So each one is different. We never went to the. I always wanted to go to like the PlayStation Bowl and get a PlayStation or something like
Nice.
that, but we never ended up at one of those.
Now, yeah, with the Rose Bowl, that was the Christian McCaffrey game, right?
It sure was, yeah.
How was that? I know my brother was at that game. I mean, was that tough? I mean, just how that started and just to kind of deflate the team that way, or
Yeah, I mean, it couldn't have gone any worse.
yeah,
As far as wanting to win the football game, and we kick off to them, and on the first play they run an angle route to Christian that was not only schemed up perfectly but executed perfectly, and he did to us what he's done to many NFL defenses and a lot of the other college defenses he played that year, is he just simply ran away from us. And 15 seconds into the game, it's 7-0, and that takes the wind out of you, right? And then the rest of the game followed suit with how that opening play went. I mean, we just got absolutely dominated on the offensive line. The momentum was all swung their way, and just absolutely torched by them. I mean, he ran a punt return back on us that we forever got, berated about in meetings, and it was just like a hard day football wise. But other than that, other than just like losing a football game, which I was always pretty good at putting stuff in perspective, it was a great day. Like the Rose Bowl was beautiful. We had this massive flyover. We're in California, and in this the area that stadium is in is crazy. And we'd been out there for, that's for a bunch of Iowa kids. That's a pretty cool trip.
Absolutely. Well, I could definitely talk forever about Iowa football. Definitely want to thank you for your time, and everyone can find you at WashedUp Walkons on Twitter and your podcast as well.
Yeah, it's thewashedupwalkons.com or hawksbyaMillion.com. We got the domain.
Love it.
On Twitter, we're just at WashedUp Walkons. Same with Instagram. I'm pretty sure you just search that on Facebook. You'll find us as well. And then myself is very simple. Again, same as the WashedUp Walkons tag, all lowercase, no spaces, no nothing, just Tyler Kluver. And yeah, it's we try to put out good Instagram content, kind of a little bit. It's more so just announcing when our podcasts are out and our picks each week. The Twitter is a place where we can kind of aggregate a bunch of people who tag us and got the flags or they got the t-shirts or whatever. We tweet out some stuff on there as well. I get a little bit more in depth with my personal Twitter, and somehow people have wanted to follow me on there. So I have a bunch of followers, but yeah, the biggest thing is just listening to the podcast, and that's the best way you can support us. So at WashedUp Walkons, just search it in any app. It's on every podcast platform there is. Yeah, and that's it.
Well, thanks again. I definitely appreciate it. And once again, this has been NFL Updated Cover 2 series, and joined by Tyler Kluver, former Iowa football player and host of WashedUp Walk-ons. Thanks again.
Absolutely. No problem.